They will face off against Kyler Halverson, who is out for another inning of relief, as here comes the first offering from him. And that will clank off the glove of Boyd. I think he got a piece of our home plate umpire. He is in some discomfort. Oh, he has fallen down. Oh, I believe he has fainted. Oh my goodness. Oh, he's back up now.
At first, it seemed like an ordinary play in a game all but over. In an instant, the game didn't matter.
The game becomes obsolete, and all you're worried about is him.
Captain Chris Pronger was defending against a Red Wing power play when a Dmitry Mironov slap shot hit him in the chest, just left of his heart.
As soon as it hit him and the kid went down, I knew he was hurt.
For a moment, Pronger appeared to be fine. Then he collapsed to the ice.
I thought, oh man, there's something seriously wrong with him because he got hit. I knew he got hit right in the chest. I thought maybe he knocked the wind out of him, but then when he flipped over, I figured he was in trouble.
What was your first thought when Chris went down?
Just get somebody out there right away.
Blues trainer Ray Barilli was that somebody. He found Pronger out cold. Pronger regained consciousness after about 30 seconds, but he remained on the ice for 10 minutes as the Blues medical staff tended to him.
He started to move a little bit, and then they started to, I don't know what they did, but he started breathing all of a sudden, and then his eyes opened up and he came to, and that was the scariest thing I've been on the ice for.
Pronger was eventually placed on a backboard and taken off the ice. As he was loaded into an ambulance, he made sure a Blues PR staff member got word to his parents that he was okay.
In this video, we're going to discuss the mechanism of an acute and fatal cardiac event known as Commotio Cordis. Now, what is Commotio Cordis on a superficial level? Well, it occurs when you have a blunt force or blow to any area that's superficial to the heart. And usually when we think of an area superficial to the heart, we normally think of the sternum. And even though obviously when you hit that area, you're not directly hitting the heart, the impact energy that's hitting the area superficial to the heart, such as the sternum, that energy is translated to the heart, and we're going to talk about the mechanism of how that actually induces cardiac arrest and potentially death in over half the cases. Now, before we get into all the mechanisms of Commotio Cordis, let's do a brief review of the cardiac action potential. So here's the P wave. The P wave represents atrial depolarization, which in itself is associated with the contraction of the atria, okay, of the heart. The QRS complex represents ventricular depolarization, okay, and that's associated with the contraction of the ventricles. Now, understand also that the repolarization of the atria is also kind of hidden in here, but you can't see it over the QRS complex. Over here on the right, the T wave is ventricular repolarization, and any repolarization is associated with relaxation of that chamber. So when the ventricles undergo ventricular repolarization, they're in the phase of relaxing. Now, the key with cardiac muscle is that each one of these phases must occur in this order, okay? Now, they can occur faster, such as in the case of a faster heart rate, more frequently, but they have to occur in this order. In other words, you can't have a second ventricular depolarization before the ventricles have finished relaxing, okay? That's what we see in tetanus in skeletal muscle. In skeletal muscle, you can have a depolarization before that muscle fiber has finished relaxing. That's how you actually get more powerful muscle contractions. But in the case of the heart, this cannot occur. So you cannot naturally have a ventricular depolarization until you have this ventricular relaxation or repolarization and then the following atrial depolarization. It must occur in this order. If it does not occur in this order, let's say you were to have a second ventricular depolarization basically before this relaxation period is finished, then what would happen is you'd end up in ventricular fibrillation, and that's very, very bad because that tends to lead to cardiac arrest. In other words, a heart attack. Okay? So how does this relate to Commotio cordis? Well, as I mentioned, it occurs because you have a blow to the area superficial to the heart. In other words, if you were to take a very hard punch, a kick, a knee, even something like a hockey puck or a baseball to the sternum, let's say, or anything that pretty much lies over the heart, so something that hits with a lot of energy, what is theorized to happen is you have activation of mechanosensitive ion channels. They're mechanosensitive, meaning they're sensitive to stretch and force. Okay? And when you have that force hitting the sternum over the heart, that energy is translated to the heart itself, and that can activate these mechanosensitive ion channels. Okay? And these are extra, that's the key word, meaning they're not supposed to activate. Okay? But they can activate and they can cause increased excitation of particular muscle fibers. Okay? Now, let's suppose we have an area of the heart that just happens to be in what we call the Commotio cordis risk window. So it's a very narrow window of time, and it pretty much occurs during the first half of the T wave, okay? During ventricular repolarization, when the ventricles are supposed to be relaxed. Well, since you are not supposed to have a ventricular depolarization during this time, if for whatever reason you happen to get hit and you open these ion channels right when you're in the beginning of the T wave, you can actually artificially induce a second depolarization of that part of the ventricles, and this will occur before the repolarization is complete. And that's very bad, because the ventricle does not get time to relax. And that disrupts the cardiac cycle, and you get ventricular fibrillation, which leads to cardiac arrest. And the reason that you really have this narrow risk window for Commotio cordis is that if you were to open those ion channels during this time, you would induce a second ventricular depolarization prior to the relaxation of the same ventricles. Okay? And that will cause ventricular fibrillation, cardiac arrest, and death. And typically what you see in somebody that gets Commotio cordis is they will collapse because they're having a cardiac arrest, and really, even with defibrillation, an external defibrillator, this is fatal in over half the cases. It's fatal in about 60% of cases with a defibrillator. If you don't get the defibrillation in time, it's fatal in about 80% of cases, so it's extremely dangerous. Okay? And one thing I want to mention is that there's a few things that Commotio cordis depends on, which makes it an extremely rare event. Okay? First of all, it requires a significant impact energy in order to provide enough force to cause the opening of these ion channels to induce the condition. And that's impact energies greater than about 50 joules of energy. So things that you normally do during everyday life probably don't have enough impact energy to induce Commotio cordis. So for that reason, usually we see Commotio cordis in sports. So if somebody were to get hit with a hockey puck directly in the chest, in the area overlying the heart, that's going to provide enough energy. If somebody hits a baseball, and usually it would be the pitcher that might get hit in the baseball in the chest, that would provide enough energy. And even things in martial arts, such as this right here, where we see a punch directly to the chest, you see the guy actually collapse. This is Commotio cordis. If we slow this video down, what you'll see is the fighter on the right lands a blow with his fist directly on the area overlying the heart. It's kind of bad quality. But what you see is the other fighter on the left collapses after a second or so, and this is because that blow had enough impact energy to open these ion channels in his heart and induce ventricular fibrillation. He went into cardiac arrest, and I don't know what happened from here, but there's a majority chance that he actually died during this event, unless there was very quick defibrillation, and it doesn't appear that there was. The other thing that this event is dependent on is both time and space. So first of all, it's dependent on time because it only occurs during the first half of the T wave, which is when ventricular repolarization is occurring. Okay, so obviously it's time dependent. But if you think about it, it's also space dependent. Remember that each ventricle, and let's say the left ventricle just for simplicity, the left ventricle does not contract all at the same time. Remember that due to the nature of the Purkinje fibers, the apex of the heart, which is at the bottom, it's the inferior part, actually begins to contract first, and then it moves up and up and up and up and up and up until finally the last part of the ventricles near the top contract. So first of all, the energy that's translated to the heart would not only have to hit that part of the heart during this phase of the T wave, but it would also have to hit a component of the heart that's in this phase. And not every part of the ventricle is actually going to be in this phase. In fact, as we know, some parts of the heart, like the atria, are actually going to be in depolarization. Other parts of the ventricles may be in depolarization, and only some parts may actually be in their repolarization phase. So not only do you have to hit the heart in the right time period, which is very narrow itself, but you actually have to hit it in the right spot. And overall, these three things make this event extremely rare. Okay? But to really summarize Commotio Cordis and what's going on, you have a blow to the area superficial to the heart. Example is the sternum. That energy is translated through the sternum, or wherever it hit, directly to the heart, and it opens extra, key is extra, mechanosensitive ion channels, which cause influx of positively charged ions, which cause increased excitation, leading to a second ventricular depolarization during the T wave, which is when the relaxation is supposed to be occurring. And that's not good because that induces ventricular fibrillation, heart attack, and eventually death, potentially in most of the cases, 60 to 80%, depending on whether or not you get defibrillation in time. All right, so hopefully this video made sense to you and you learned a lot. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for future videos and notifications. Thank you very much.